Hello, CS112. Today I'll be going over a quick solution to Lab 9, which has to do with file I.O. The first thing I'm going to do is go to Blackboard and download the file input.txt, and then I'm going to make sure that just my code is with that file in the same directory. So I'm just quickly going to open up a terminal to verify that. I'm going to go into where I remember saving it. So in this case, you have downloaded input file.zip off Blackboard, you've unzipped it, and then if you were to cd into input file and then see what's in that directory, you would actually have input file, where if you were to go into that, you would have the files you need. Originally, you will only have, you will only have file input.txt here. And that's perfectly fine. You want to create a Python file and move it into the same directory as your input.txt, just so it's easier to read files in, so you don't have to type out a path here. So I'm just going to dive right into it. I'm just going to start by creating a little code skeleton, but I guess first it would be good to actually talk about what we need to do. You are going to be given a file input.txt that has this format. So just to verify, if we were to open file input.txt that we downloaded off Blackboard, it's going to be the same thing here. So essentially, it's going to be a file where every line is going to say what is the result of a number multiplied or divided by another number plus or minus another number. So in this case here, you have 3 times 4 plus 2, which equals 14. We are to put the result in this format into a file called fileoutput.txt. So we already know that we need to open up a file to read from and open up a new file to write to. So that's going to be the first thing we're going to do here. I'm just going to say open files, if I can type, to read/write. And then after that, what do I want to do? Well, let's get to that in a sec, but let's think about what we want to do here. So we know that when reading from a file directly, we are putting, for instance, on the slides, we learned about methods like read lines, like this right here, which is a pretty easy thing to use, as well as some list and string operators there. But what does read lines do? Well, let's find out. Let's actually find out. So I'm just going to say file in open. I'm going to set that equal to open, and then what am I going to open? I'm going to open the file input path, because that's what we have defined up here to be our file input path. And then I'm going to open it in the reading mode, so it's only for reading. And then I'm going to create a file output. I'm going to set that equal to open. And then what do I want to open here? Since we have no variable up here, well, it's perfectly fine. We want to call it file output.txt. So what open does, especially when you have a writing mode here, is that it's first going to search this path file. So in this case, it's going to search the same directory for a file called file output.txt. If it does, then it will start changing that file. But if it doesn't, then it will create the file and start writing to it. However, if the mode is read, if the file does not exist, it's not going to create the file and start reading from it, because that wouldn't make any sense. Instead, it's going to return a file not found error. So that's a good way to differentiate these two pretty basic modes here. It's a good thing to know. But now, what does read lines do? So what does read lines do? Well, we can easily find that out by doing a for. Well, we're expecting it to turn it into a list, but let's just determine it for real. So first we want to say file, I'm going to call it file, in equals file, I'm struggling to type today, file in open dot read lines. And I want to say for I in file in print out I. So what am I expecting here? Well, I'm hoping that each I is going to represent an entire line here. So let's just run this code real quick. So if I type in Python and then the name of the file, we're getting an error, which is fine. And for some reason, I have funky indentation. I have no idea what this is about, but let's just skadoosh. And that should be good. Okay, so yes, each I is representing a, I don't want that there. Each I is representing a string, which is going to be a line of the file. So now we kind of have it in the format we wanted to, except we want to get the specific numbers and operations we want to do here. Since I is just a straight up string here, we can make this into a multi-dimensional, or it's not, sorry, we can make this into a list in and of itself, where each word or string separated by a space is going to be a list, so, or an element in a list. So in this case here, this entire thing would be a list, and each word would be an element in the list. And if we want to the important guidelines, we have a function that can do that for us. So in this case here, if I say like x equals I dot strip, what strip does, especially with no parameters, is it will, sorry, I'm using strip, or I meant to say split. We don't want to strip anything, we want to split it up. Split, all right. So what this does is, with no arguments, is it will split up by default by the spaces, which is exactly what we want. You can add characters in here of what you want to split it up by, but in this case we just want to do by spaces, and that's what it is by default. So now if we were to say print out x every time rather than I, let's see what that does. And it does exactly what we need. It gives us another list here of exactly what we need. And again, under the guidelines here, if we're kind of stuck on what we need to do next, well, it gives you a little hint here. It says you may use conditional statements. Well, that's pretty obvious. It's a pretty basic thing that we should be allowed to use. Well, there's a reason they're mentioning this, because that's essentially what we're going to be doing from now on. And just to make it a little more readable down below, I'm gonna create 3 variables for each of these numbers. So I'm gonna create a mult variable, but this mult variable is gonna represent this first number, and I'm gonna set that equal to x 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So x4 is going to represent each of these numbers in the list, because we're guaranteed proper inputs. And I'm going to cast that directly to an integer so I can start doing math with it right away. And I'm going to be doing the same thing with the others, just giving it very vague names. I apologize for the vague names, but it is what it is. So again, that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as well as 8 and 9. So 7 and 9 are also going to be added here as numbers. So let's create num2 and set that equal to 9. So now what are we going to do here? Well, we need to first multiply mult by num1, or multiply or divide mult by num1, and then add or subtract that result with num2. So those are just 2 simple if-else statements. So if I say if, in this case, it's going to be x 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if x5 is going to equal the string multiplied, then we are just simply, we are simply going to do mult times equals and num1. However, if it isn't multiplied, since we are guaranteed proper input, the only other thing it could be is division. So I'm going to divide it by num1 if it is not multiplied. And then next, we're going to take care of the addition. So in this case, if x 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so if x8 is equivalent to, let's do plus, then we know that mult is going to plus equals by num2, else, and since we're guaranteed good input, that means it will have to be minus, which is mult minus equals num2. And now lastly, what are we going to do with this? Well, per line, we are going to directly write it to file out. So just using the file out function, or the file dot write function. So file out, excuse me, dot write, and then we are going to say results with a colon, and I'm just going to concatenate it to mult, because mult is the variable we're using here to kind of add things up. So I'm going to create some nice spacing here, and then I need to cast it back to a string, because we cannot add a string and a number. That doesn't make any sense. So now if we were to save that and run it, the first thing I want to do is show you guys that there are So there are 3 files in here, but this is going to be empty. I just happened to run this file once I said file dot out. So for instance, if I was just to show you guys, there is nothing in here when I try displaying it in my terminal. So I'm just going to remove it for now, just for the sake of this demo. And so right now when I list out the file, all I have is my Python file and the file input.txt. And what it's going to do when it tries opening this file that doesn't exist in here is going to create that file and write to it. Some other very important thing that I forgot to do is, for one, this needs to be inside the loop because I'm using X, and let's say variable defined inside the loop, and I want to do it for every line, and every loop is going to be a line. So I'm going to comment this out actually. And then something very important that I forgot to do here is I need to close these 2 files. So file in open and file out. So file in open dot close and file out dot close. Now, if I was to run this, again, I only have cat.py on file input.txt, but if I was to run cat.py, when I say ls, this was magically created. And now if I was to list out the contents, so let's go to file output.txt, we have some stuff here. Let me just open it up in the editor so we can actually see what I'm doing here. And that's weird, they're all in the same line. Well, what I'm going to do here is add a new line up to the end of this, and that will solve all of our problems, because that means every single result line we're doing, we're immediately going to move the next right to the next line. So if I save this, and I can actually view this and watch it update. So now when I run Python cat, what's going to happen is it's going to search this current directory, because that's the file path I gave it. It's going to search for file output.txt. Since it does see it, it's going to replace it. So I'm going to hit enter, and as you can see, this was updated automatically. Again, if I say ls, and I just want to remove the file output just to make sure, as you can see, this doesn't exist anymore, so I'm just going to exit out. But now when I type ls, it has just the 2 files in it. I'm just going to run it one more time, and it should pop up. And if I were to view it, it has the correct result. So if you guys have any questions, do let us know.